Welcome back, CSC 121 W1 to exercise 24C part 2, or we're going to call this exercise 24D. So part 2 of 24C will be 24D. So this will be 24D just so you know it's something different, and this will be using a Python file instead of just working in the MySQL interpreter. So right now I'm in the Python Anywhere dashboard, and we're going to make a new file here. And we're going to make a Python file, and we're going to run some SQL queries, or one or two, just a couple to try it out. And we're going to connect to a MySQL database from Python. And what we're going to need is an mysql connector. So to find out about that, we're going to go to W3 Schools because they have everything there we need to know. And I'm going to go to Python, and I'm going to scroll down to Python MySQL. And I'll go to Get Started, and it says Python can be used in database applications and so on. So read some of this, and we don't really have to install a driver necessarily, but we can import it into our Replit interface. So we're going to import mysql-connector, and then we're going to create a connection, which isn't that hard. We just need our host name, our username, and our password. Now we already have that. We already have our username. That's your username in Python Anywhere, and your password is going to be that mysql admin if you use that, and your local host is going to be what I'll show you in Python Anywhere. So let's set this up. What I'll do first is I'll even go to this part here, create connection, and just copy all of this instead of just doing one at a time. So I'm going to copy all of this, and I'm going to go to my dashboard, and I'm going to make a file. So I'll go to Files, and I'm going to go into Databases. We'll keep it there since that's where we're working, and I'll just call it 24D, and I'll just call it MySQL. You could put your last name or anything else, but I'll just leave it like that, and then I'll just put py because this is a Python file, so make sure that you put .py there, and then click on the New File button. Now this won't be as nice as working in Replit, but I am going to paste my code here, and we want to fill in our information just to make it more relevant to what we're doing. So what we'll do first is I'm going to rename this and just call it con for connection. So that'll represent our connection, and you could even put con here instead of just the database, because I don't want you to think it's the database, because this is the connection to the database. And we're using the mysql connector. We're using what we just imported up here, and we're using the connect method that's looking for the host, the user, and the password. Now where is that stuff? Your username should be whatever you're using for your Python Anywhere. So mine is HomaRCN. And my password is going to be mysql admin. And I mean, you could even put the database in here as well, but let's go find the local host. So where that's going to be, I'm going to go down here to Databases, and I'll right click and I'll open it in a new tab. And here's my host address, and here's your username if you didn't know. So I'm just going to copy my host address, the whole thing, and go back here and put it where it has localhost. Sometimes you will use localhost, but not here. So we're going to put that in there. What we should do at the end is always close the connection too. So I'm going to go here and put con.close and use a close method at the end. We should always close the connection when we're done. So let's save this and let's run it. I think the only way to know it's working is you won't get any errors right now. So let's run the file. And it's going into the MySQL connector, so everything seems to be working. So we're not really seeing anything yet. So we're not getting any errors. I think if you had it wrong, you get an error. Let's just see if we just kind of did something wrong here, and we hit save and run. You get an error. So we have everything working okay. So I'll go back here and change that. Make sure I have MySQL admin. Save it. So we're okay so far. Now what we're really going to want to do is select something and run a query. So let's go to select, and we could select from a table. So here's the information here. Now we also have to add our database. So we didn't do this yet. So let's add our database, and then we'll work on all this stuff. So let me just add our database. Now what is our database? Our database is this, the states. It's your username $states. So you can highlight that and go back here. And I'll put a comma. Remember, the last one does not have a comma. So this does not have a comma, but I'm putting a comma because I'm putting one more. and I'll just put database. That's what they have, so I'll use that. And then I'll put 2 quotes, and then I'll paste this in there. And that's all I should need. And I don't need a comma at the end here. So I have that correct. And then I'm going to copy this stuff here. And I'll put this all before closing it. I'll copy that. And I'll go back here. We're not going to print anything yet, so I'll highlight over this. And I'll paste this. Now, there's something called a cursor, which is an object in the MySQL connector that actually lets you fetch information from a database. So we're going to use that cursor. So we're setting up a cursor object, and you could just call it cursor. I'll just call it cursor. And I'm going to use con here, because remember, we're using con for connection. So there's con, and then the cursor object we're setting up here. So through the connection, we're creating a cursor object that's going to do things like fetch all. It's going to help execute any queries that we have. And I'll go here and I'll put cursor. And what we could do too, this is something else, I can also make a variable called query. Let's do this. Equals, and I'll put this on another line. And I'll put my query up here. I'll cut that out of there. And I'll paste it. That way we can just work with the query here, and then in the execute, we're just going to execute query. So we'll execute query here. That way we can just be a little freer about how we write our SQL statements. And you can put semicolons in here. I don't think you have to either. Now, basically, this is where SQL is going to be inside these quotes. So we need quotes here when we do this, because it is a string. It's going to run a string. So we do need quotes, even though when we use SQL, we don't use quotes. But everything we did in the previous video, we're just going to do in here. Now let's just make sure we have all the names. We can have something here called result. I'll just call it result instead of my result, and I'll call this result. And instead of for X, I'm going to use for row, so it's more clear to what we're doing. So we're going to print rows out here, R-O-W. And again, these are just variables, so it doesn't matter. You could have left it the way it is, but I'm just going to make it, I guess, make more sense. Now, fetch all is a method of the cursor object, and again, we're using cursor, so I'm not calling it my cursor. So I'm trying to make it more like my own so I understand it. So we have con variable representing the connection through the MySQL connector. And then the cursor object is just called cursor. So we have a variable here. And then we have a query variable that represents our SQL query. And then cursor is going to execute the query, and the variable's in there. And then our result is going to represent what comes out of it, what comes out of the query. And then we'll basically print that out. So we'll basically cycle through the result and print out rows of that so it looks nice. And then we'll close the connection. And I think we can also do cursor.close right before that. Cursor.close. And close both of them at the end. That's kind of best practice to do that. Even though it doesn't show you that in here, we should really do that. So what we can do here, we'll just do something real simple. We don't have to do a whole lot here. And you could try other things too. Maybe I'll give you a challenge of something else to do. But let's just do something simple. And also, I'm going to save this. Remember, you do have to save it in here. And what we'll do is a query that selects all from, if you remember, our table name is states. So that's our table, states. And then we'll say where, and then you might be thinking, well, oh, I forget all that other stuff. Well, if you forget all the other stuff, go here. Go to Files and right-click and open a new tab. And here I'll go to Databases, and I don't want to open the one I have. I'll open that output text from the previous exercise. That way I can look at my stuff here. Order, state, abbreviation, and what we're going to do is we're going to find the most populated states of the 13 colonies. So that means our order ID has to be equal to or less than 13, and then we're going to order by population. And we don't even have to put year established or size or anything. We're just going to use pop. So we can use particular fields or columns on that. So I don't know if you remember doing that, but we're going to do that. So anyway, we'll go back here. So select all from states. And we don't have to do select all. We could select, I don't know if we need order ID. We can just do abbreviation, ABR, and then state, which is the name, and then pop. So we'll select the abbreviation, the state, and the pop. Anything else we need? The abbreviation, the state, and the pop, and you could do order ID. I don't know if it matters, but maybe I'll put order ID in there, and that's underscore ID, and then a comma. It's the only place we have commas, and you don't need the spaces in here, so if you want to take them out, that's fine. So these columns, order ID, abbreviation, state, pop, and you can do them in different orders. So if you want to put the abbreviation first, because it looks better, and then you want to put the order ID, you can cut that and put it here. Now just make sure you fix all your commas. Get rid of that one, leave a comma, and then we need a comma here. So again, 4 things just in a different order, 4 columns. Abbreviation, state, so they'll look nice, and then order, and then population. And from states where, and then we'll put where order ID is less than or equal to 13. So that's the first 13. And we'll say order by, and we'll put pop. We'll put order by pop, and we'll put descending, so it does the largest population. Now I think we can put a semicolon here. I don't think that creates a problem, but you can leave it out, I think. So here's our SQL query. Select abbreviation, state, order ID, pop from states where order ID is less than or equal to 13. So that's the first 13 colonies. And we're going to order by population. So I assume like Pennsylvania and New York is probably high in population. And let's just check our variables to make sure everything matches up. Cursor. And remember, this is the cursor method, the cursor object that we have here. And this is the variable. And there's the execute method, query, cursor.fetchAll is another method, result, make sure you don't have result and results, and then we have row, and then we're closing our cursor, and then we're closing our connection. So if you have older ones there, make sure you update them. So that looks okay, and what should appear is 13 states, and in a different order by population, by doing that. So let's save, and let's run it, see what happens. And oh, it looks okay. I'll move that up, and we have New York, highest population, and then Pennsylvania. Actually, I mentioned them, so I know a lot about the colonies here, because you had Philadelphia, which was a big gathering place during the early colonies. So New York, Pennsylvania, Georgia. I didn't realize Georgia was so populated. North Carolina, New Jersey, Virginia. You would think Virginia, but not that early on, and then finally Delaware, which is small, so it goes by order. So you could change how they're ordered too, so you could still have order ID first if you think that looks okay, although these actually make it kind of look nicer over there. Now they are showing just the rows, so you are getting the parentheses of all the data, so you're just returning data. And yes, if your question is, hey, can we also take this and put it in an CSV file? Yes, you can do that. I'm not going to do it in this video, but yeah, we can do that fairly easy, and we can write it to a CSV file, which is a comma separated value, which you can actually put it into a spreadsheet like Excel. You can, if you wanted to open this up in Excel and do that. Now a lot of times that's what you'll do with a database, because if you work in admissions and you want to print out something, you could do a query from a database and then print it out as an Excel spreadsheet and say, oh, these are all the graduates that have a GPA higher than so and are majoring in this, and then you can have a spreadsheet of that you can distribute to other employees and faculty and things like that. But for now, we're just doing this, and that's all we really have to do. And I guess for your challenge, I'll probably have you do another query that you have to kind of look up, but so far that's pretty easy. So that was just putting our SQL query in here, and make sure you save it. And if you want to save this, remember what you can do is you can go here and just highlight this if you want to just put what you did, and then hold Shift, and that'll select your output that you did here, and you could copy that, and you can go and make a new text file. So I have files open here, so I'll just go back to databases, and I'll make a new text file, and I'll call it 24D, and I'll just call it output, because that's what we did with 24C, and I'll put TXT. So 24D output TXT, and I'll create a new file, and I'll paste it. So that's all you have to do. You could just save that, and I'll see it, because now I see a lot of people have nominated me as their teacher. I'll be able to go in there and look at this, and that's kind of your results for that. Now I will probably give you a challenge that you can do something else, some other kind of query, just to practice another query to this. I don't know if we'll do a CSV file or not, or how much time we'll have, because I know we have to jump into tkinter, but for now, this is all you have to do for 24D. So once you did that, make sure you save this, and make sure you save your 24D output, make sure that's saved, and that's all you have to have. So you're just going to have a py file, and you're going to have a text file of your output that displayed in the console down here in the Python interpreter. This is not the MySQL interpreter, this is the Python interpreter because it has the 3 kind of arrows there. And we basically extracted information from a database using the MySQL connector, and we connected to the database, and we created a cursor object that can actually run queries and fetch information, and then we printed it out in separate rows, and then we closed off both our cursor and our connection, and we did that all through Python. So that's all you have to do for this exercise. Shouldn't be bad, but we may do a little bit more with it. And again, that was Python MySQL database. A lot of times PHP will interact with a MySQL database. For anybody familiar with WordPress, PHP is used in WordPress to do that. And here, I don't need anything else here. We didn't even have to open this up. We just had to get our information. So I'm going to close this. I don't need this anymore. And I can close this. And as long as everything's saved, I can close this. And then you just have to go to 24D in Unit 13 and just indicate that it's finished. I'll make sure I look at your PY file, and I'll make sure that I look at your output text file. And that's all you have to have for that before we move on. So that's 24D in Unit 13, working with MySQL and Python.